Silence is often where fear begins. Not loud violence, not chaos, but unanswered questions. A missing moment, a fragment of evidence, a detail that refuses to fit. Investigators are trained to trust patterns, but patterns can lie. And when they do, entire investigations can begin chasing something that was never there. Tonight's cases are not about killers who escaped. They are about killers that were imagined into existence. Ghosts created by coincidence. Suspects formed from grief. Predators built from incomplete truth. And in each case, the real tragedy wasn't the phantom. It was the time lost believing in it. It began with routine. A patrol car parked in a peaceful corner of town. 2 young officers inside, unaware that their final quiet minutes had already passed. Then violence arrived, without warning. No confrontation, no shouted demands, just sudden destruction, and then silence again. When emergency crews arrived, the scene felt unfinished. Weapons missing, no witnesses. One officer clinging to life without memory of what happened. The investigation had nothing to hold on to, except DNA. At first, it felt like salvation, the one voice that could not lie. But when the profile was processed, investigators felt something colder than relief. Recognition. The same DNA had appeared before, years earlier. Different crimes, different cities, burglary scenes, robberies, unexplained violence. The evidence suggested not just a suspect, but a predator moving invisibly across borders. Someone careful, someone experienced, someone impossible to see. The media gave the figure a name that sounded more like folklore than law enforcement, a phantom. And as the matches multiplied, the myth hardened into certainty. Investigators began searching for a woman no witness had ever seen, a criminal who left behind only presence, never identity. But a quiet unease lingered beneath the surface. The crimes were too scattered, the timeline too aggressive, the silence too perfect. It wasn't the killer's brutality that disturbed investigators, it was her impossibility. The truth emerged slowly, and then all at once. The DNA had never been pointing to a killer, it was pointing to a mistake. A factory worker, entirely innocent, whose genetic trace had unknowingly contaminated forensic tools before they ever reached crime scenes. The phantom had been real only inside databases and investigative assumptions, a suspect created not by violence, but by trust misplaced in flawless science. And long after the revelation, one question remained heavier than embarrassment. How many real leads disappeared while detectives chased a ghost? Nightlife creates the illusion of safety. Crowds, noise, movement. But isolation can happen in seconds. A young man steps outside a crowded venue. A message is sent. A path is chosen. And then, absence. Days later, water returns what the city could not find. Authorities call it an accident, but grief resists the word accident. And when similar tragedies follow, coincidence begins to feel like intention. Another drowning, another unexplained fall, another family searching for reasons that feel proportional to the loss. Soon, fear constructs its own explanation. A presence near the canals, a figure emerging from darkness, a predator who turns water into a weapon. The idea spreads faster than evidence ever could. A serial killer with no face, but a method everyone could imagine. Stories grow more detailed with each retelling. Some swear they felt watched near the water. Others become certain they narrowly escaped something. One survivor describes a shove from the darkness, a moment that feels like confirmation. But investigations reveal something less cinematic and far more tragic. unlit paths, alcohol impairment, slippery edges, cold water shock that steals strength before panic can even form. Cameras watching the canals capture countless movements, but never a predator. No shared forensic trail, no consistent suspect, no pattern beyond vulnerability and environment. Yet the myth persists, because randomness feels crueler than danger. A killer can be feared, but an accident offers no one to blame. And so the city continued to live with a shadow that may have existed only in the space between grief and explanation. The ocean rarely explains itself. It keeps secrets without effort, but occasionally it gives something back. A child walking along a quiet shoreline notices a shoe resting among driftwood. Out of place, almost new, unsettlingly heavy. Curiosity gives way to horror. Days later, another shoe appears miles away, then another. Each discovery feels less like coincidence and more like a message. Different victims, different locations, the same impossible detail. Public imagination fills the silence quickly. A killer using the sea as a burial ground, a pattern hidden beneath the tides, a mystery too disturbing to be accidental. The theory spreads because it feels intentional, because scattered remains suggest design. But forensic work moves slower than speculation. And slowly, identities return. Missing persons, accidents, private tragedies carried into open water. Nature, indifferent and methodical, explains what horror tried to claim. Marine activity, ocean currents, modern footwear designed to float. What looked like calculated cruelty was often the final stage of unrelated losses. The sea wasn't revealing a killer, it was revealing how grief can drift, resurfacing in fragments long after hope has faded. Some fears are born not from events, but from numbers. When tragedies share similarities, the human mind connects them instinctively. A mother disappears, another victim found months later, then another. Communities already burdened by neglect begin noticing patterns long before institutions do. Shared vulnerability, similar methods, geographic overlap. The conclusion feels inevitable, a serial killer hiding in plain sight. The theory offers something investigations sometimes cannot: unity, attention, recognition that these losses matter. But evidence refuses to cooperate with the narrative. DNA diverges, timelines fracture, suspects differ. What appears to be a single predator dissolves into separate, complex realities. Yet the theory remains emotionally powerful, because it transforms scattered grief into a single story. And stories are easier to carry than randomness. The idea of a serial killer is terrifying, but it is also strangely comforting, because monsters can be hunted, identified, captured. Chaos cannot. These cases remind us that fear doesn't always follow facts. Sometimes it follows silence. Sometimes coincidence, sometimes the unbearable need for meaning. And in that space, shadows can become suspects, phantoms can become killers, and entire investigations can unfold in pursuit of someone who was never there. The question that lingers isn't whether these killers existed, it's how easily we believed they did.